Hello, this is Raheem Hassan coming to you from Automation Innovation 2014, and I have the honor of sitting here with Dan Hudson, who's the AVP and Market Leader from Cognizant. So Dan, thank you for joining us here.
My pleasure, thanks for the invitation.
So robotic process automation, it is just the latest buzz, right? But one of the questions that we often get from our clients is, well, exactly what is it? So how would you define?
Well, it's really not so much a buzz anymore. Robotic process automation is a reality, and it's been with us for a number of years, but it's been used and operated at a fairly low level. So people would write scripts, or they would write macros and do those sorts of things. And what was really missing to make these kinds of tools really workable in the environment was the ability to control the tools and the ability for these tools to log information and be able to prove regulatory compliance, et cetera. So some of the new tool sets that are out there, and it's not really a one-size-fits-all environment. There are good products that sit at the desktop level. There's products that sit in a back office level, whether they be object-oriented kind of products or scripting type products. What's nice about them when you do automations, and they have to be using structured data, it has to be systems that people can access, but if it's a rules-based process and the people have access and they don't have to make human judgment, we can not only automate those systems, but we can use external control functions to manage those, for lack of a better term, virtual robots.
Interesting. So in a lot of the conversations that we've been having with some of our enterprise buyers, right, that they often say, well, I've been doing automation for years, right? How is this really different than that?
And they have been doing automation for years in different areas. So they probably have done some scripting, they've probably done some macros, they probably have put some workflows in place. These robotic process automation tools don't replace any of that. They simply operate those same tools and workflows that are in place faster and better than humans do. They're not making mistakes. Once they're built properly, they don't make mistakes. They will find exceptions because there will be things they try to process that they haven't been trained to do before. But once the exceptions have been put in place, you can expect in most situations, especially if it's a batch type environment, 95, 96, 90%, 98% throughput rates with zero defects. So the main difference is now you have a documented process and you have multiple tool sets. And what we're finding at Cognizant is, as I was saying earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all market. There are situations where we need to enable the desktop user to be more productive. And if you can do that, you're going to reduce headcount because they do their job better and faster. In other cases, we're going to be doing the work in a back office type environment. A lot of automations have to deal with unstructured data. So scanned images, handwritten notes, those are very, very challenging for a lot of companies. And what's I think unique relative to Cognizant is we now have a technology stack that's been built, which with much of it is our intellectual property. It's not just off the shelf software that we're configuring. So we've got the ability to put the right tools in place. And as an example, if we can take a process that has a lot of unstructured data, make that data structured, it's now available to an RPA or a virtual worker to actually go do automation work on it. So we've tried to build a stack where we can address everything from the bottom of the process environment all the way up to the top of the process environment.
So I want to pick up on one of the things that you said earlier. You talked about cost savings, right? So I've seen numbers anywhere between 25, 40, maybe even 50, 60+%
Right.
savings. So what types of savings are we talking about here?
So here's how we counsel our sales organization when they're talking automation with their clients, and that is that in many environments across the entire spectrum of the processes they operate, we can save anywhere at the low end of 10% to around 30%, which is a pretty significant number. It's certainly not as compelling as 60 or 70%, but within all those processes, we may find some that we can automate 100% of the process, and others where we can't automate any of the process because it requires human judgment.
Okay.
So on average, 10 to 30% is not a bad rule of thumb until you've had a chance to get in and do an assessment, which is somebody who's trained in these multiple technologies coming in and actually looking at your processes. Once that's done, you can start to prioritize which processes are have the highest probability for automation success.
Okay.
And then you can start to put together the pricing, which the implementation side of it is quite frankly very inexpensive relative to the total savings. I mean, when you think about virtual workers, these are workers that never get sick. They work 7 by 24 if we need them to. They don't ask for raises. They do, they're exact opposite of humans.
Right.
And then you need to start to look at the soft costs as well. So if you have large groups of people working in a building and now you only have half as many people, you need half as much real estate.
Gotcha.
Definitely brings down the cost, and that adds to those savings. In highly repetitive work environments, we often see 20% turnover of people, so you're constantly recruiting those people and training those people as well. So those are really hard costs that need to be taken into account when you're trying to determine what's the right ROI, and that is the way to look at it. So look at a group of process, assess which ones are the right ones to attack and for what reasons. Are you trying to save money? Are you trying to reduce errors, which ultimately provides higher customer satisfaction? Or are you trying to be able to prove regulatory compliance where you may have been uncompliant before? So the value proposition of robotic process automation changes based on client pain points. So completely different selling process for the salesperson, as opposed to, I can take what you have and do it in a lower cost country and save you 30%. This is the next wave of that. So now we've got digital arbitrage as opposed to pure labor arbitrage.
Interesting. So what is, are there factors that are impacting the adoption from the buyer's side? So what are you saying there?
There are some factors that impacting from the buyer's side. Because these technologies don't integrate into the IT environment, they basically sit at the user interface level. To the IT organization, they look and they feel just like a human being. So they've got the same logons, the same credentialing. So it's really important to get the IT organization in early, because if you get 2/3 of the way through an automation process and go to IT and say, okay, you need to be governing this because it's sitting in your IT area, they may look at it and go, I'm sorry, we've got other tools we think are better than that. So get IT involved as early as possible. So let me turn that around from the provider side. As providers start to put automation into play, it starts to erode the model they've been using for the last 20 plus years, which is labor arbitrage.
Right.
And so
cheaper bodies.
Exactly, cheaper
Offshore,
bodies.
Right.
Exactly right. So a lot of BPO providers look at this and say, well, we're basically cannibalizing our top line revenue. And our approach is to look at that and say, it's going to happen regardless whether we do it or somebody else does it. I'd rather do it today and keep my client and find other pieces of work that can start to help offset that top line erosion, rather than find out at renewal time that I lost 100% of the business I was doing because somebody brought in an automation solution.
Yeah, so you better make the pivot, right?
Exactly.
From a service
where it
provider
makes sense, absolutely.
Right. So last question here is, so based on what you've seen, right, what are your predictions for kind of where RPA is going as we enter 2015 and beyond?
So I would, as we go to 2015 and beyond, I would change the term from robotic process automation to intelligent process automation, because that's where companies are going to start to look at multiple technologies. And I don't want to say chained together because that's too much of a simple term, but multiple technologies that are being brought together and integrated together, not at the IT level, but for a particular process. So we may provide some desktop enablement for a portion of the process. We may provide some batch type processing for a back office. And over time, what you're going to see is the intelligence of the actual developers and the people doing assessment, making sure that the right tool sets are in the right place to achieve the right outcome for the client. And it really is all about reduced errors, reduced costs, and improved regulatory compliance. So I think you'll start to see the term morph a little bit. I think everybody's trying to make their mark on, is it service delivery automation or robotic process automation? Right now, RPA is a pretty good term, but I think over the next 2 or 3 years, you'll see it start to morph into more of an intelligent process automation, because we're using multiple types of technologies together.
Makes sense. Dan, I want to thank you for your time.
Yep, always a pleasure. Thank you, Raheem.
Bye.